Hello, everyone, and welcome to Business Performance USA. This is our weekly webinar, and we're starting here at noon Central. I know I've had some folks email me and say, I'm sitting on the webinar. I hope you made it back. It is noon Central, so if you're in, we have people from all the time zones. So hopefully those that were on at 11 their time were able to, it's probably they were from the Eastern time. Hopefully they made it back. We are honored to have all of you as our guests today. Business Performance USA actually produces these weekly webinars every Tuesday, and we provide business insights on a wide variety of topics that are important to business professionals. We're a voluntary association and anyone can join, and we provide this online business information exchange. When you become a member, you can actually meet people from across the U.S. engaged in business conversations on topics such as this, and you can tap into our experts, and you can become a member at no cost anytime. So all you need to do is go to, and I'll switch the screen so you can see this. You can go to businessperformanceusa.org and sign up. I'm Cynthia Stewart. I'm a co-founder of Business Performance USA, and I'm also managing partner for my company, Evermore Services. And we have a executive presenter today is Matt Graham, who is a lawyer and also the EVP of Operations for Track One Technology, which is our presenting host today. So the way this works, if you're new to our webinars, is that I actually will turn over the screen to Matt here shortly after I introduce him. And what you can do is ask questions during the presentation, and I'll be actually monitoring those questions that come through. And when we get a break, we will ask Matt, our experts, exactly what your question is and get those answered. If we don't make it during the call, we'll make sure that we get an email to you. So with that, I guess it's time to go ahead and introduce Matt, our executive presenter. He is talking about the meaning of match, how to improve your background screening results. Actually, Matt is the Executive Vice President of Operations of Track One Technology. He has over 15 years of experience in employment practices, and he joined Track One at the beginning of 2011 and has helped the company to become one of only 42 companies to attain accreditation by the National Association of Professional Background Screeners. He's worked very diligently with Nancy Lynn Roberts in that front, and both of them are making significant contributions to the professional background screeners and the organizations in terms of their accreditations and standards and things like that. Matt actually serves on the Best Practices Committee for that association, and he co-chairs the Data Breach Prevention Subcommittee. And that's an important one. As we all know, data breaches are becoming quite a significant issue for all of us. He's also certified at the advanced level, and one of only 40, by the way, in the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which really governs background screening and is something that he and Nancy talk frequently about. I have been listening to these webinars, and I want to let you know that these are recorded, so you can share these at your will. If you become a member, you can watch these. There are quite a number of, in fact, I think now we're up to 12 different webinars that Track One has given, and they are really enlightening many of us who don't have a background in this or who need to know more about background screening. So with that, what I'd like to do is go ahead and pass this over to Matt. And like I say, don't feel shy. Be sure to ask your questions. I'll be monitoring those and making sure that those get answered during this hour. So, Matt, I'm looking for you. There we are. I'm passing the screen to you, and we'll let you know when your screen is up and going and when we hear you.
Great. Yeah, things tend to spaz out just a little bit whenever we do these handoffs, so just let me know whenever you see everything looking good on your side.
I do. I see your screen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. I hear all the wonderful things that you say about me, and then I remember that, oh yes, indeed, that advanced certification comes up for renewal this year, and I have to go do that in Denver early next month. So hoping to stay certified at the advanced level. We'll see what happens come November. So yeah, in fact, I believe this is webinar number 13, if I have these numbers correct. So we've been doing quite a variety of topics and subjects, and we've covered a lot of the basics, and now we're really starting to deep dive into some of the subjects that really, I think, deserve a lot of attention, because while they seem like they're very narrow and focused, really do have a pretty big impact on the results that you get back from your background checks. So today what we're talking about is the meaning of match, and the trying to parse out what exactly that means, and when you say you have a match for somebody, what are we really looking at, and what are the factors involved. So one of the interesting things is, and one of the misconceptions that is probably out there with background checks, is that everything keys off of the social security number, and really that's just not true. Most of your criminal records are based on the match of name and date of birth. The social security number has been one of those things that have been slowly over the past decade, really, I guess the courts have been redacting that information from public records. I mean, when you think about it for a second, these are in fact public records. That means anybody that can go down and access those. So I don't think that people would like, and people have contested the fact that their private information is available in the public record. So as I said, courts have been redacting that information, which when it comes to doing background checks, leaves companies like ours without that information to make a positive match. So the match is, again, based on the name and date of birth. So when you think about that for a second, I mean, how many people out there, I'm sure at least at some point somebody has come across another individual with your same name. I love vanity. It's what drives the internet. It makes billion-dollar companies out of Facebook and Twitter and whatnot. So there's a website out there called howmanyofme.com. And you could go there, you can type in your name. I did that for myself, of course. My first name is actually Robert. My middle name is Matthew. So I plugged in my first name and my last name. I came up with 5,025,995 Roberts in the U.S. It's the third most popular name, there are, let's see, 229,504 Grahams. That's a heck of a family tree there. So that's statistically, that's the 108th most popular last name. When you combine the two, that gives you 36,116 people named Robert Graham in the U.S. So if you think about that for a minute, that's quite a big population upon which to make a match. I did the same thing with the name John Smith to kind of prove a point. There are 46,105 John Smiths in the U.S. So I ran through some quick math, and anybody out there that kind of dabbles in stats can kind of check me on this, and I may be way off base, but I did some what I call kind of meatball surgery, or some Jethro accounting. Came up with, so the average lifespan of a male is 77.4 years. And so we'll just take an even distribution of John Smiths born in each year, which gives us roughly 596 John Smiths born per year. And if we're going to assume that the age range of our applicants is between 18 and 55, that's a good range for people applying for a job or an apartment or whatever. That's a range of about 38 years. So 596 times 38, that gives us roughly 22,648 John Smiths. Again, making another assumption, according to the National Employment Law Project, 1 in 4 Americans has an arrest or conviction record that would show up in a routine criminal background check. So that means that using only the first and last names, and I'm going to throw another interesting thing at you, is that, I told you how the first and last name and the date of birth is often the identifiers that we have to work with. We are further handicapped in certain situations by, again, courts wanting to remove or private information from public record. So in a lot of cases, we're only given the year of birth of the date of birth to match with. So again, so if we take all the assumptions that we've made so far, the 22,000 John Smiths, 1 in 4 Americans with a criminal record, and using just the year of birth, potentially we would have 5,662 John Smiths with a criminal record. So I guess if your name is John Smith, you're in really, really deep trouble, because anytime a background check is run on you, that's how many potential hits are going to come up against your name and year of birth. So I hope all of that kind of gives you just a, I threw a lot of numbers at you. I'm sure nobody was checking my math, but let's just say that's a lot of potential name match and date of birth matches that wouldn't necessarily be your applicant. So how do we work through that? What are some of the challenges, and what are some of the ways that we can address the fact that there's so many potential matches out there? So starting with some of the questions, or some of the challenges that we've already talked about, the social security numbers not being used, whole birth dates not always being there. Heaven forbid we allow for the possibility that some clerk typed in the wrong date of birth. You can see why it becomes very challenging. In addition to some of these issues, in addition to some of the same people with the same names, there's also the concept of name variations that you have to work through. William versus Bill, sometimes Harold III versus the suffix not being there. Same thing with junior versus senior. Same thing with maiden names, Mindy Smalls becoming Mindy Smith, and then different variations of spelling on the same first name. So you can see that there's a lot of challenges that we have to work through when doing basic criminal searches off of the name. So one of the things that you need to do is really, when you're talking to your background check provider, ask some of these questions up front. Now that you're aware that there are some challenges and some issues that you have to work through, you really need to ask those questions of how do they address those challenges. Obviously, the social security number is not going to be the primary means of making a match, but we'll come to the social and how it actually can be used and can help in just a couple of minutes. But so really communicating with your background check provider and asking these questions of what constitutes a match in their search criteria. So as I said, there are some really easy ways that we can go about addressing the subject, and we'll start with, I think we've got about 5 different methodologies that we'll go through. The first one being it really is kind of simple. It's double checking what you type in on the applications page, making the request for the background check, making sure that it matches what the official documents of your applicant actually say. A lot of times people will take a job application, which your applicant is filling out, and they put in, if somebody asked me what my name is, I would say it's Matt Graham. But my official legal first name is Robert, so Robert Matthew. If you were to type in Matt Graham on the background check system, you'd get back results on Matt Graham. But anytime that, I could make a joke and say the last time I was arrested, they asked me for my first legal name, but never been arrested, never happened. So you would be looking at the legal first name. So it's extremely important that you actually get copies of the driver's license, the social security card, the passport, whatever documentation that you are gathering up, probably for either your E-Verify or other purposes. Check it against the actual information on the driver's license, whatever. Don't just rely upon that printed application. I know it's easier. It's what's probably right in front of you as you're typing that information into your background check system. But especially for people that are odd like me and go by their middle name, or And in the case of someone actively trying to deceive you, they're going to put something on that background check form or that employment application that may not be 100% accurate. Same thing with the date of birth, not just looking at the name, but making sure you've got that year of birth absolutely in sync with whatever's on the documentation, the official documentation that your applicant brings you. The second thing is making sure that we put in full information. So again, for people like me, Robert Matthew Graham is probably more appropriate to put in than Robert Graham, because we do have full name on most of the records that we review for criminal records. That middle name can be a huge differentiator. It can save you the time of having to go back and ask that later. So I know sometimes when we're filling out forms on the internet, we look for just those fields that have the little asterisk and fill in only the minimum required. But really, when it comes to background checks, it's not about saving keystrokes. It's about being absolutely and fully complete. I can't tell you how many times that middle name is the thing that makes the determination of whether that record belongs to your applicant or not. And I know in most cases it's not a required field, although in our particular system we've learned our lesson and adapted for that. We know that some people just flat out don't have a middle name, so you can't make it a required field, because if you are making it a required field and the applicant has no middle name, and you type in Z or X or no middle name, anything that you type in is going to be utilized in the matching process. So we've made a special effort on our middle name handling to, if the applicant really truly has no middle name, to check the box, and that processes the form a different way. But again, any suffix that you might have, anything, address information, which we'll talk about in a minute, fill in that application form as completely as possible, because that will make a difference on your match. You may think you're saving some time by not entering all the data in, saved a few keystrokes, but invariably you're going to have to spend the time on the back end to clean up any potential non-matches. I've gone through a couple here, Cynthia. I'm monitoring the chat feature and I'm looking for questions, but I'll pause right here just in case somebody does want to chime in.
You know, Matt, I just have a comment. I was filling out legal papers and noticed that the example that I got said also known as, and I think I have personally about 10 variations of my name that I've gone by, partly because of being married, partly because of the Social Security when I got married gave me a different, they used my middle name instead of my maiden name, and I requested my maiden name. So and I've run into my name, Cynthia Stewart, a lot of places, like at airports, rental cars, all the time. So this is a really intriguing issue for all of us on a variety of levels, but certainly when you're doing the background, it's very clear. So I can't wait to hear more. There are no questions at this time.
Okay, great. And we do have a topic coming up next for our next webinar. I'm going to try to tread lightly and not go too deep into some things that may be discussed on our next go-around. But the name variation, you saw on one of the previous slides, the two different spellings of Edward. Most of your background check systems, ours included, have a way of taking care of those variants. Robert, Robbie, Rob, Bob, Bobby, with a Y, with an IE. Our system will make adjustments for that type of variation. But you bring up a really good point with the maiden names and the alias names. In this day and age, it's not incredibly odd to have somebody with multiple married names. So yeah, those are things that, again, you want to be very clear in your understanding of what your background check company is providing you, and know that in a lot of cases, those alias searches or those former name searches aren't automatically included. And sometimes you have to either make a special request by ordering a special component, or in some cases, you just have to run multiple searches. So it's a really good point, and it's something that, to be aware of. So with in addition to making sure that you fill out the forms completely, providing as much information as possible, the alias names, like we've talked about, it's important for you to consider that. A lot of times your employment application or your other kind of employment paperwork will request that. There are searches that can be run that are tied to the social security number that pull up an address history, that also pull up alias and other former names. Those are really good components to add to a basic background check, because it can at least point you in the direction that additional searches may be necessary. You may not automatically want to run every possible name that comes back on one of those alias searches, but you at least probably want to know that that exists. And if you've asked for other names and nothing was provided by the applicant, and you see multiple names coming back from one of those searches, that also gives you kind of a check and balance. One kind of points to the veracity of your applicant. And like I said, it also may just give you some additional ideas on where to do some additional searches. And that kind of leads us to our next point. As I mentioned, that social security number isn't really going to help you directly in matching your applicant, because the social security number doesn't exist in the public record. But as I mentioned, that social security number can yield an address history, which can be used to match up to both the information that your applicant has provided. A lot of times on those application forms, it will ask for an address history, and if they conspicuously omit Texas from their address history, and you run a report on their social and you see some addresses, maybe from a couple years back in Texas, again, you have another point of reference for determining how truthful is your applicant being. And also, if you see Texas history and they've said they've conveniently omitted the fact they've lived in Texas, then you may want to take that address history, determine the counties involved, and run searches in those counties. And we have a lot of our clients that do that. We have a lot of clients that run what we refer to as our CrimTrack product, which does just that. It creates an address history and runs a county criminal search in each of those unique counties. So as I said, the social security number may not be able to help you directly, but a lot of times in the criminal record, the address of the offender at the time of the offense is included in the public record. And if the address histories match up, that gives us another way of tying a particular record to your applicant. So true, we may have had 5,662 John Smiths to deal with, but if the record shows an address of 123 Main Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and your applicant through their address history shows a 123 Main Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma, then we can conclusively, or pretty close to conclusively, tie those two together. It's the process that, and I love this word, it's one of my calendar a day words, it's disambiguate. If you have multiple John Smiths, it helps you tell them apart, or disambiguate. So again, those extra components can certainly play into the process of tying your records together.
Matt,
Yes.
we do have a comment, kind of a comment and question. So not all states are available for state searches. What if we need to do a background screen on someone from Wyoming, for instance?
Well, and that's a good point. The question really is what type of search, when you say you're looking for a state search, what type of search you're talking about. Because we actually have, I mean, there may be just a few states that don't make their state police or state Bureau of Investigation records available from the statewide repository. Most of those, in fact, are available, but regardless, I mean, we usually will have some method of pulling records from every jurisdiction in the country, whether it be through a state police search or whether it be from a county level search. And any of the attendees from our previous webinars will understand when I say county level searches are your best source of information, that really is the case, because any of your state repositories, that information that flows up from their county level sources. So when you start at the county level, it really is a better approach. It's the difference between using a rifle and a shotgun. The county level searches is very, very focused. It's very pinpoint. It's the rifle approach. Your state repositories, your multi-county search options are the shotgun, and you get a broader coverage, but you may not hit exactly what you're looking for. So the idea is that regardless of whether a state level search is available, you should be able to do some manner of search in every state in the union and the outlying territories that fall under U.S. control. Any follow-ups to that or any additional questions?
No, not, but thank you for that. The key point being that county level searches actually provide you better information.
Absolutely, and wherever the records are available electronically and via systems, we make every attempt to go that route. But we actually have a network of runners, courthouse runners, that will go up to the courthouse steps and pull individual records, and we pretty much have access to 3,141 counties all across the country.
It turns out we do have a follow-up.
Okay,
the type of search was for sex offender, statewide or national search on sex offenders.
Okay, and yes, we actually have access to both. So we have access to the Drew Sojan National Sex Offender Database. All the records that are available in that, we have access to that. And then we can also go individually to the state registries as well. And those, all 50 states, again, are available.
Okay, very good.
And our final tip, and it will seem like the most straightforward, the easiest one, but again, it goes back to verifying the information from your applicant with the official government documents. But typos and transposing first and last names, those are common mistakes, and really it's because the name is so important in making the match. You just need to be very careful with what it is that you're typing in. We've seen, I have a son named Colin, and we felt like we spelled his name the most common spelling, C-O-L-I-N, and sure enough, this year a little boy in his class is also named Colin, but it's Colin with 2 L's. So typos, misspellings, those are easy mistakes to make, but they can be very costly when it comes to the accuracy of your searches. So one of the things that we've added to our system, it's been a couple of years now, but previously when you filled out your application form and hit submit, it just immediately went into the system and started processing. But we've created a process, we've created a page that will pop up that's kind of a verification step, a confirmation page that gives you one last chance to look for transposition of first and last names or any type of typos or incomplete information. So we're doing our absolute best to protect you from fat fingers and other types of mistakes, but speed kills, and it applies equally to your highways and your information highways. So just be very careful about when you're entering in your data. And so finally, I guess I'll kind of wrap it up by summarizing what we've talked about, and then we'll open it up for questions. And Cynthia, if you want to, I don't know if you want to open that up for just the audio portion, or if you just want to continue to filter it through the chat feature. But we'll have plenty of time for questions, and we'll get you out of here in time to finish up some lunch maybe. But as I mentioned, the name match is not always going to be 100%. So especially when you have issues of common names. So most of your background systems, ours included, will tell you the criteria that was used, and if it is a name match only, meaning no other criteria was available to make a match, and that often is the case with maybe the sex offender registries or some of the high-level, broader databases. Federal records are kind of notorious for that as well. It'll be indicated as a name match only. And then what you may want to do, because we're not always capturing this information on our system, but oftentimes the criminal records will have other identifiers like race, eye color, hair color, height, and weight. Obviously, weight is one of those variables, but if it does report back that the record belongs to a Caucasian and your applicant is African American, that can help you start to, again, to disambiguate or maybe filter out the records based on criteria that you have available to you, but just weren't available to us when we put back a name match only. So look for those designations of name match only. Look for the designations that come back in the criminal record that have other identifiers. Scars and tattoos are also things, believe it or not, sometimes will come back on the criminal record. So if a criminal record comes back belonging to someone that has a tattoo of mama on their right shoulder or right bicep, then, and your applicant has a nice, pristine, clean arm, then there's another way to rule something out. So just understand what we mean when we say name match and a match in general. And then just recognize too that the things that we talked about today are the potential sources of error when it comes to making a match. And then understanding too how your provider is going about and dealing with those issues. We're always happy to answer those questions. We don't try to keep it a secret. There's no secret sauce about how we are conducting our searches. Most of you that are our clients know Steve Dahl, who's our Director of Customer Service. Anybody on that team will be happy to answer questions about how matches were done and any questions you may have of how do I tell if this is really my John Smith or not. We're happy to walk you through that. And then just as we went through those 5 steps, just know what you can do to increase the probability of making a good match. And for me, I just keep coming back to this. The number one thing is, I know you've got a busy day. I know you're trying to move on to your next task, but if you really will take the time to fill out the complete information, even though not all of the fields that are put in front of you are required, if you'll go ahead and fill in all of that data, I guarantee you that our team then has much better idea of how to make those matches. And when multiple John Smiths come back, maybe you don't have to call us up and ask us which one is which, because you provided the race, you provided the other data, a full address and things that we can use to disambiguate. So I'll leave it at that, and then we'll open up the floor to questions, and we can even broaden the topic a little bit. It doesn't have to be focused particularly on match, but we'll open it up for questions.
Well, we have about 4 so far. So, folks, if you have a question, please be sure to log that in your question box on your GoToWebinar control panel. So let's start with this one. And I'm noticing that this doesn't, at least if I can expand this where I can read it better. Okay, here we go. How does that work in states like Florida, where they require the background check through the state, which is very pricey, and then we run the DMV and the Social Security number track with you? So what are our options? Are we missing something? Is there a preliminary screen we can run to avoid the state fee until we are sure we want the person and they will probably pass? So that's a good question. It's how do you really control cost when there's all these requirements? So bottom line, can we run track 1 DMV and Social Security with you, Matt, and then and then we go through the state for Florida? Any ideas on that one?
Sure. Yeah, it sounds like what we may be dealing with the situation is that there may be a particular industry type involved where there is a state statute that mandates a particular type of check. Unfortunately, we run into that quite often where the state legislature has deemed it important to run a background check, and they feel like they're doing their constituents a good service by mandating a particular type of check, which most often is a fingerprint-based search that runs through the state police or the State Bureau of Investigations. And I could very quickly hop up on my soapbox and tell you all the reasons why that's not really the gold standard. The one good thing that a fingerprint search does for you is it does eliminate a lot of the issues that we've been talking about today, the issues of match. Because the fingerprint search is good at one thing, which was confirmation of identity. The challenge is those fingerprint searches are often expensive because of the fingerprint component. And the records to which those are tied are not necessarily the best records that are available. Typically, the state searches that are going through a state police or state bureau of investigation, those records suffer from the same problem that the FBI database suffers from, which is they're incomplete. We often have attendees at our national conference from the FBI. They're frequent speakers at our conference, and by their own admission, their records only contain final dispositions in about 65% of the cases. And so what that means is, when I first joined here, I learned that a criminal record is a far more fluid and living document than I originally anticipated. At least while there's things that are still in progress. And a lot of times what happens in criminal records is there is a deferred adjudication, which means that, kind of like a probation or some kind of plea deal, that if your applicant, or in this case the offender, remains squeaky clean for 2 to 3 to 5 years, then subsequent judicial process happens and the original plea is changed and the original disposition is changed. So oftentimes what happens is those records, that once they enter into the state system or the FBI system, they enter in with that original disposition and they never go back and update those. Or worse yet, all you have is the original arrest record and you never know whether or not that went to trial. And as anybody in the HR field knows, using arrest records is inherently dangerous when it comes to the EEOC's involvement. So, again, but the statute says what the statute says. It mandates the process. As much as I'd like to shake my fist and change it, we can't. So in a lot of cases, you're stuck having to run that state level record. But because of the inherent weakness in those records, if what you're trying to do with your background screening program is to provide a safe and effective workforce and not just comply with minimum state requirements because you have to, you'll be best served to augment that state mandated search with what you're doing through a third-party background check provider like Track One, and supplementing that state search, which may sometimes stop at the borders of your own state and not include the FBI search. Supplement that with something that goes a little bit deeper, something that covers a broader spectrum too, with like the full broad screen search that we offer. And again, even those state repositories won't have everything, so searching at the county level. So I know it's an extra expense. I know it's an extra hassle, but sometimes in an effort to get the best quality search and the most complete search available, you do have to supplement those.
Well, and Matt, when you talk about that extra expense and hassle, it occurs to me that if the point in the process for your background screening is really important. But certainly when you're considering applicants who are going to come to work for your company, there's nothing like an expense where, as one thing that we talked about at one time, in like an employee and out like a thief, usually the repercussions of bringing somebody in who misrepresented their background and who you found out after they were hired they can really wreak havoc. And really, one applicant can actually cost you well more than all of your background screening, I would think, in terms
Sure.
of, cost to a safe culture, cost to the employees' morale, and cost to the company in many, many cases. So anyway, I
One of the
just
one of the
thought I'd throw that out there.
one of the best analogies I can draw, and I think it's certainly appropriate here, is background checks are a lot like insurance. You can get a lot of insurance and you can pay a lot of premium, and you just have to come up with that right balance. And fortunately, I think, and through the EEOC's own guidance, they really are recommending a background check process that is customized to the individual employee, or at least at a position level. So rather than having a one-size-fits-all background check program, we really are hoping that you are running different checks based on the level of employee. And that may be also a way to control your cost. I mean, you don't have to run, a $100 background check on every employee. So look at what functions they're performing, look at the areas of exposure, look at the potential risks involved with hiring somebody that could potentially, as you said, wreak havoc. Just look at that potential and then just try to find the right balance. It's not going to be an exact science. Again, there's budgetary constraints. There's a lot of different things that you have to factor in. But one thing to consider, and this is ultimately the standard by which you're always going to be judged, is what would the jury think? What would the jury think if they were to find out that an extra $10 on a background check was the difference between somebody coming in and doing bodily harm on your work site? And that's ultimately what is your background check process reasonable? And that reasonability test is going to be the eyes of the jury.
Okay, another question. Matt, when Track One finds a match, do they try to disambiguate before they send the information back to the requester?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we are held to a very high standard as a background check company. The Fair Credit Reporting Act, not only does it put obligations on employers as the end user, but it also puts obligations on us as the consumer reporting agency. Nearly half of what the statute really is governing how we operate. So we're very keenly aware of that, and one of the it comes directly from the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and it's our mantra here is consumer reporting agencies have to have reasonable procedures to assure maximum possible accuracy. And I love that as an attorney because, wow, there's about 6 words there that I can parse and spend multiple hours on. So, but honestly, we take that to the extreme, and we're doing everything that we can to ensure that the reports are accurate. We owe that obligation not only to our clients, the employers, but we owe that obligation to the applicants as well. We are keenly aware that the actions that we take as an organization make the difference of whether somebody gets the job or not, whether somebody gets the apartment they're looking for. So we take that very seriously, and it's we know that we have an obligation to make sure that those reports are accurate. So, but we can only work with the information that we're given. We are essentially looking at the public record, which think about the individuals that are involved along that chain and how many of them there are and how many areas where potential human error can pop up. And then also just based on the issues that we've talked about today, when we're dealing with very common names and are only given limited information that we can make comparisons on, we can only do what we can with what we've got. So again, I think that just speaks to the importance of providing complete information so that we can do our job and provide you the best possible match.
Okay, here's a question. What do you do about candidates who apply and provide their own third party background check reports?
That's we're seeing that happen a lot more. and we actually have developed a service that we are marketing direct to consumers so that people can do their own searches. What you have to look for in that is, one, you have to understand whether the background check that somebody comes in with is from a reputable source, and two, you would need to make sure that there's something that is some form of check and balance, because honestly, the tools that exist out there, I mean, somebody could very easily sit down with either Photoshop or Adobe Acrobat, modify a PDF file, go back in and change the text and change it from a, they can delete a record. So you would just need to make sure that what you're getting is the unadulterated source. Now, a lot of the systems that I've seen out there that allow an applicant to come in with their own background check provide the employer with a authentication code or some way of logging in and seeing the result directly from the provider, rather than just relying on a piece of paper that somebody brings in. So the only caution that I would urge on that is, if somebody's just bringing you a piece of paper, just think about how easy it would be for you to sit down with a computer and come up with a report that says you're an astronaut.
All righty. I've got several questions that are kind of long, and I'm trying to be sure that I sort of pick among them because of our time. One that's of interest that I think I'll talk to you about is, for those of us that are the 3 and 4 who have no criminal backgrounds, any suggestions on making sure that we still protect our good name and make sure that we're not somehow, and I know this has happened, identity fraud, of course, is out there, we know that, but any way that people who are among the 3 and 4 can really protect their names.
Absolutely, and that's really the reason why we created that service that we market directly to consumers. And if you'll allow, Cynthia, the shameless plug, it's verifymypast.com. I think a lot of you have probably heard the encouragement and the recommendations from FTC and just about everybody out there that says you need to check your credit report. Check your credit report. Not for the things that you know you've done wrong, but for the things that may be on there that are not necessarily you. Well, the same logic applies to a criminal background check. For the very reasons that we've just been talking about for the past almost hour now. Things that can potentially pop up on there that don't belong to you. If your name is Robert Graham, as I said, there's a couple thousand of us out there, and if somebody with my same birth year commits a crime, that may pop up and show to be me. So there are services out there, ours included, that you can go and run a background check report and see what comes up. So the same logic that encourages you to do that for your credit is also equally applicable to criminal background check reports. And then one of the good things about the Fair Credit Reporting Act, being a consumer protection statute, is it provides a process for consumers to correct information that's not accurate. And so hopefully with whatever system you come to run your own personal background check, they should be able to provide you with ways to correct that information. Those companies, they'll be operating as consumer reporting agencies in most cases, at least if they're reputable. And we are mandated as consumer reporting agencies to offer a consumer dispute process, whereby information can be corrected on your public record. Now the challenge with that is it's only going to correct our report, but we often will put consumers on the right path to go contact those original reporting jurisdictions, the public record sources, and correct their information there as well. At least by running your own background check, and if something does pop up and you deal with it, you may still have to deal with that same issue with whatever background check company that runs you the next time, but at least you'll be aware of that, and you can, going into the situation, if you're applying for a new job or applying for an apartment, you can say, hey, look, I've got a common name. I know that when I run my own background check report, this record comes up. This isn't me. I've done following steps to take care of this. But if this pops up, you're obligated to provide me a chance to correct this. And I'm telling you now in advance that there may be something that pops up. And that's something that a lot of people don't know. And again, it's been previously covered in some of our other webinars that there is a recourse for employee or applicants to correct their information, and employers are obligated to provide an opportunity to correct that. So if you're using background checks, and if I say the words adverse action and you don't know what that means, go back and check out some of our previous webinars, because that's a big deal, and you need to be aware of that.
Okay, I'm going to take one more minute for one last question that looks pretty simple to answer, and then we'll go ahead and close, Matt. I had a person says, I had an applicant ask me today if running her background check would affect her credit report score.
That's a good question. The short answer is it kind of depends upon for what purpose the background check was run. If they're an employee or if they're an applicant for employment, then no. That type of credit check does not show up as an inquiry on their credit report. It's a specific type of background check or credit check that we do. Has no impact on the credit score whatsoever. If it's being run for purposes of somebody looking for an apartment and being done to verify ability to pay, that's often a different type of credit check that's run, and that will show up as an inquiry. And then you can read all about it on the credit bureau websites as to how their credit scores are impacted by inquiries. With the 3 bureaus, you'll get about 5 different answers. But for normal employment-related background checks that include a credit component, no, that will not impact an applicant's score.
Okay, very good, Matt. You want to tell us about your webinar next month? I guess that's the next slide.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's a related topic. So if you enjoyed what you heard here and want to hear a little bit more about it, it is consistent with this and kind of plays off of some of the issues that we talked about. But what's in a name? How to identify name variations in background screening. So we talked a little bit about those with the Ed and Edward and all the different name variants. I kind of looked up again, vanity is one of the driving concepts in the online world. I looked up my own name, and there were 52 variations of Matthew. Matthew, Matt, 1 T, 2 T's, Mateo, Matthias, just a lot of different variations. So and it even starts to include some other language variants. So a lot of different things that can come up, and dealing with how to do name matches. And I think we'll probably cover the issue of the alias and the maiden names in a little more detail. So yeah, tune in for that if the concept of what constitutes a match and what's in a name, if that appeals to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Matt. And folks, I appreciate you guys sending in questions. That always makes it more interesting. Let me take back the screen, and I will show you, well, look at that. I have to scroll all the way forward. I'm going to show you what's coming up next. You should be seeing my screen now. Next, okay, good. Next week, we have Dr. Jeff Stewart, who's going to be talking about economic value creation. And he talks about the triangle, the things that have to be in balance for really a company to drive their economic value creation. And we'll let him tell us all about that next week. After that, we have our popular Emily Shoup. She's the owner of Shoup Training and Consulting, and she's talking about the emotionally intelligent team. So it's that whole concept of emotional intelligence. And then we're welcoming back a new presenter for us, Milton Corsi. He was extremely popular in his first webinar, which was on the science of the things that we know, the science of the human motivation and what science knows that business doesn't. That was very popular and very well attended, and he's an inspiring fellow on webinars. Come back and hear how to inspire those we lead at the last seminar. in October. And we'll have, of course, a lineup for November and December because we keep on plugging away. Folks, we thank you today for all of your attendance and your questions. And we just want to invite you to become a member. All you have to do is go to businessperformanceusa.org. It's free. We also have radio series, and you're able to catch any of the webinars that, if this topic is of particular interest, you can go back now. We've got 13 webinars recorded from Nancy and Matt, and they are quite informative. And because of their National Association for Background Screening affiliation, they really do know, they are experts in the industry and know what they're talking about. So we welcome you back, and we hope to see you back. With that, Matt, thanks again for a great webinar and all of that information. It's intriguing. I'm going to have to go do some of those things, verify my past, and check out all the variations of my name, Cynthia Stewart, and see who's out there. And I hope you guys will do the same and take some of this to heart. With that, we're ending the webinar, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody. Go out and make it a great day.